Dear listeners, we've all been following Poopy's journey since her arrival at Sanctuary, watching her find her place, settle into her new home, and most recently begin to open up to a possible friendship with Kenya. She had started to experience the peace and freedom that Sanctuary brings. Many of you will already have heard the sad news that Poopy has passed away. Please note that this episode was recorded prior to her passing. Hello and welcome to Global Sanctuary for Elephants podcast, Global Rumblings. Global Sanctuary for Elephants, or GSE for short, is a non-profit organization with a mission to create vast safe spaces for captive elephants where they are able to heal physically and emotionally, often from very traumatic pasts. I'm your host, Nadia Mari, and I'll be taking you to the lush jungle of the Mato Grosso region in central Brazil, home of GSE's initial project, Elephant Sanctuary Brazil, where Asian and African elephants, lovingly referred to as the girls, live their best lives. Hello and welcome back to a brand new episode of Global Rumblings. Thanks for tuning in again this week. Today we have some exciting news to share with you about Kenya and Poopy and their blossoming friendship. So let's head over to Brazil to say hi to Kat and Scott. Hi, you two.
Hey, Nadia, how are you?
Hi, Nadia.
I'm fine. I'm wrapped up in a blanket in my little cellar office, but I've actually bought a carpet. So I don't know why I never had one. I always had my feet on the cold tiles, and now I've got them on a warm, fluffy carpet. So I'm all snug, and I'm looking forward, as always, to talking with you about everything elephant related and about the sanctuary. So you have some exciting news to share with us about Kenya and Poopy. Let's have it.
We do have some exciting news. Everyone's been waiting patiently, and
or not so
sometimes
patiently.
not so patiently, and sometimes with really high expectation. And before I tell you what that news is, I will let you know, sorry, editors, we have a lot of choppy, speaking of, choppy blackbirds that are visiting the house, and they are really, really noisy right now. So they have beautiful songs. We actually did a video several years ago with Hannah, with one singing above her. They make all kinds of great noises, but they may take over the podcast here soon. So good news. Poopy and Kenya are now living fully together. No barriers, no gates, no fences, just enjoying each other's company. And they're continuing on this lovely, beautiful trajectory of Kenya doing her best to control her emotions and Poopy doing her best to be big, brave, giant Poopy girl. She is so good. She's so brave. She's really doing well. Kenya's letting Poopy take the lead. And it was interesting yesterday I told Marina, one of our researchers, she's like, I can't wait, it's so exciting. And I said, be careful, we don't know what it's going to be. And at lunchtime, she's like, where's all the celebration? Where's the rainbows? Where's the party? Because they weren't really touching each other. They were going like close proximity, like 2 meters away from each other, but that was it. It was really calm. And at the end of the day, Marina said, that was perfect. Even without touching, it was perfect. It was exactly what both of those girls needed. And that's not what we want or what we expected or what people expected it to be. You know, somebody in the morning said, best friends forever. It's like, wait a minute, that's a lot of expectation still. And at the end of the day, everyone said, wow, that was really just perfect.
So Kenya holding back like that, because you said in previous podcasts, you have said she's got a big energy and she's so excited, and, you know, she does her trunk pops and her tapping. And so it must have been to contain this excitement and to pick up Poopy where she is and respect that. That is amazing.
Well, one of the easier parts that helped with that a little bit was they did it in the morning. And Kenya is not a morning gal. A girl after my own heart. She is sleepy in the morning. So that energy that she generally has doesn't come out until later in the day. She was the same way in Mendoza, that in the morning she is still in total nap mode and she's nice and quiet and relaxed. So when they were initially put together, Poopy was the one who was more interested because Kenya was just doing her nappy, I'm sleepy kind of thing. Scott had said he even had to go and make sure she was awake so she didn't end up being surprised if she was napping that at some point she was going to turn around and all of a sudden there was an elephant there.
Yeah, her butt was, she was at the water trough. Her butt was in yard 1, and Poopy had been going in and out of the chute in yard 1, stall 1, and then coming a little bit closer, then going back and just hanging out in the chute, which she doesn't normally do, but super chill, observing, but not doing too much. And then because it was kind of quiet, I had to go make sure, Kenya, there's another elephant behind you. The gate's open now. Did you see what's going on? And then she did a little trunk pop and came over, and then she started watching a little bit more. But again, our job is to not try to make that scenario happen, but we also don't want to create a negative scenario by being too complacent. So when we talked to the caregivers, somebody said, do you want to decorate it? So they come closer and closer. It's like, no, this is not about trying to manipulate that. This is just creating that space for them to do what they want. But then a little while later, I brought food over for Kenya because I had to say, Kenya, wake up, girl. And I explained that to the new caregivers also, what we're trying to do of, we see a potential risk. And we can prevent that risk by just saying, hey, Kenya, wake up a little bit. Look this way, which it took a while. She wasn't fully asleep, but she was definitely not fully connected to the world.
Oh, I love her for that.
Yeah.
I think it would be good for people to explain a little bit why Poopy is being brave in this relationship, and it's not, we're putting that on that.
Take it away.
You spent more time with her in Buenos Aires.
So many of you know, we talked about it before, and none of these things should be surprising based on what we know about the girls. We share so much about their journey. We share, about what they've been through. And sometimes when you take a step back and think about it on that, based on the history, it all makes sense. Like Kenya sleeping. This isn't new. This was Kenya there. We used to joke about it. It's like, when are we going to do treatment? Or when are we going to do crate training? Not until 3 o'clock, because she's not going to do anything until 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And that was whether cold weather, hot weather. And every now and then she would surprise us. But it was typically, and we guys know that from, the recordings that we did from there.
And
was always
their normal staff at Mendoza goes home at 2 PM.
Yeah.
So, technically, she's only waking up after everybody has essentially left the zoo.
So then with Poopy also, we've talked about it with her relationship with Cookie. Cookie was the dominant one. Cookie was the star. Cookie is the one that grabbed everybody's attention, and she is the one that controlled and dictated Poopy's life, basically. And Poopy had to walk eggshells around her many times, not because she was excessively, dominant, but she was dominant and controlling of Poopy, and Poopy was very watchful. And, Poopy, as we talked about from here, she was not only... And here they are again. Can you hear them very loudly on your side?
Yeah, I can. I can also hear the insects, the cicada, these really high-pitched ringing. So, people, Cat and Scott are in the middle of the jungle, so this noise is for free. You don't have to pay any expensive meditation music. Just, tune in to the jungle.
Just tune in. And it's we're waiting on rain this afternoon, and the cicadas start singing more when there's rain coming. So hopefully they're right. So with that, Poopy was with the same elephant for her whole life in captivity. So she went through a cycle after Cookie passed away of redefining herself and defining who she is and finding who she is. And then as sanctuary life, that continued, trying to figure out who she is, not only as a sanctuary elephant, but as Poopy as an individual. And then also with a very exuberant Kenya arriving, and not really sure what that energy meant. And Kenya has done a really good job over the fence of letting Poopy know that she can trust her and that she's going to listen.
And aside from Cookie, Poopy and Cookie came to Buenos Aires when they were 3 years old, and Mara was there. And they initially kept them all together. Mara was kind of a mother figure to them. They had a really very sweet relationship. And we've talked about African Asian thing before with it doesn't work or it works until it doesn't. And then one night there was a fight between the three of them. And what we have been told is that Mara pushed Poopy into the moat. And they were actually concerned about being able to get Poopy out, so on and so forth. And they were able to get her out. And it was after that they didn't keep the three of them together anymore. They would alternate with Mara being inside and them being out and vice versa. So Poopy hasn't, she's had essentially 2 elephant relationships since being stolen from the wild, and both had negative sides to it. I mean, the relationship between her and Kooky was a loving relationship. The healthiest love, maybe not, at times I'm sure, but, that is what happens in captivity when there is no ability to express yourself, where there is no ability to get away from the other elephant, even if it is just for 5 minutes. I mean, I think anybody can imagine if you were locked in a bathroom with the same person for 30 years, that at some point you are not going to get along. And it really is the equivalent of what we do to these elephants. So not to say anything bad about Kooky, they are what captivity makes them. But just to lend to the fact that Poopy just hasn't had great experiences with other elephants necessarily. And Kenya is going to be very different from her. And I think one of the best things Kenya is doing is trying to be really obvious about the fact that she's listening and she adjusts herself with whatever it is that Poopy's trying to communicate.
Yeah, and Poopy taking the lead, and Kenya's saying, Poopy, you drive the bus on this, and I think it's also just, exactly as we said, at the end of the day, people said it's exactly what it needed to be. It was just perfect watching that dynamic unfold and how they're taking it slow, and how they're analyzing and being there, but just honoring that process. Those friendships don't happen overnight, and just because you put two people together doesn't mean they're going to be best buds. Just because you put two elephants together, and that's the problem with space. That's the problem with small number of elephants. It's hard you don't know that they're going to get along, and you don't know that's who they want in their life. They may want a completely different personality.
We don't all love everyone. I'll be the first one to say it. There are just people that I will meet that I just don't need in my life.
And here we are, we do two very fractured elephants, as most are from captivity, going through a process of tremendous recovery. And again, nothing's being forced. It's their time. We are the ones that had the control over when we opened the gate, but we were watching that evolution. And over the last few weeks, it's just like, no, this really feels like it's the time. And we saw a shift in the behavior of both elephants after they had been, away from each other a little bit, whether it be treatment or while cleaning one of the yards. Sometimes, the yard 2 is isolated, the middle yard is isolated while it's being cleaned. And as soon as you open up the gates, either Kenya or Poopy then go to that divider gate right away. Not necessarily to have touchy-feely interactions between each other, but to go in close proximity. And we saw that behavior started to amplify, and that's part of the indications like, okay, maybe they were really looking for that next step now. And that's why we took the chance and opened up the gate and saw what happened.
Yeah. It's so fascinating, and sort of spontaneously I have to think about what you just said, Kat, about locking up two people in the bathroom and expecting them to get on. I mean, the injustice that we do towards these elephants, and then how respectful Kenya is now, that she has these nuances that she can feel what Poopy is feeling, and as you said, reading her and letting her take the lead. That is just really incredible. And also it highlights your work as well, that you give them time, so you don't feed them to bring them together, you don't force it. No, you've opened the gates, and obviously you're there to take care and make sure that nothing happens. But they are deciding after now 6 weeks, is it nearly, since Kenya's been there, that now was the time. So that is fantastic news. Very, very happy, and I look forward to seeing lots of videos. Just don't forget to press play, Scott.
Well, be patient with me. I am technologically challenged, as you know. But also, regarding videos, one of the caregivers from the Asian barn said, do you have videos? And we have little snippets, but also we don't want to just be in that space just, with a camera right away either, because that changes everything as well.
Another part of it is people have seen in the past with Asian elephant introductions, it's elephants that we know, we have established relationships with, we go up and check on them and get a little silly sometimes. What we don't want to do with Kenya is go over, get excited, get silly, and then essentially perpetuate that big energy that can sometimes be intimidating to Poopy. So, if we go over with the camera like we do with a lot of the Asians and go right up to her and, are like, it's so amazing, she's going to go over the top in, 2 seconds. She's doing so well with controlling herself. If we encourage her to not, she's not going to.
I did encourage her yesterday.
I know.
Just a little bit.
No.
because that's part of who she is, that
No,
big
I
rumble
think-
vocal girl. And, and it was a little bit of, you guys are doing so good together, a little bit of reassurance for both of them. I'm so proud of you. You're being so brave, Poopy. Ken, you're being so great. And then, part of it is watching where they were at the time and hearing the vocalizations that were happening and encouraging a little bit of that, that expressiveness. And then, Kenya was a little bit vocal and Poopy was a little bit vocal. Kenya was a lot vocal, and Poopy was a little bit vocal. But then stepping back out of that space also, and just a little bit of research, checking in with them. You guys aren't alone on the journey still. We're here. We're not the integral part, but we are here to support you guys.
No, I think that was all good yesterday. I do think there are times where Kenya does need that because she is being so good with like keeping herself grounded and not going off the rails. So I think having that every now and again, it's not going to be the same as I think what people are used to when we do introductions with Asians, how we are much closer and much more engaging, especially a lot of times because the elephants who have been here longer, that we have the established relationships, do like to come to us and check in, or even come to us and be excited and be like, do you see? She's so nice. She's my new best friend. You have different levels of that with elephants that have been here longer. So just so people understand why from the outside this is going to look a little different than maybe they're used to with when we do Asian elephant introductions, although they should already clearly know that there's a difference because it's usually 3 to 4 days later and they're already in together, and that is not what happened with this.
No, but let's go back to what we learned from Tennessee also. Let's go way back. We had an established group of elephants that were built over time, similar to what we had with the Asian girls. And then we had, 3 African elephants arrive almost on top of each other, I think 2 weeks apart. They had no guidance. Mm-hmm. They didn't have an elephant leader who knew what sanctuary was.
Yeah.
So they're experiencing all of this for the first time, not only what sanctuary is, but who they are and what that journey is like, and developing new friendship. Where the way the Asian group here started was similar to in Tennessee, where you started with 2 elephants, that had a history together, had a journey, and then you add 1, and that journey continues, and there's an evolution. And most of the people that are joining us now have seen what happens after you have the foundation of what some of the elephants know as sanctuary. Mm-hmm. They have that familiarity and knowledge of what sanctuary is, and we don't have that with these 2 Africans right now.
Sure.
And had the same thing, and not just African Asian in Tennessee also, way back when we had 8 new elephants arrive at the same time from circus. And they, if we had 8 new elephants arrive into the existing group, that would have been one thing because that existing group already had sanctuary knowledge. But you have them arrive into a group where nobody has that sanctuary knowledge, it's different. And so it's a different journey than what we had with Asian elephants. But let's go back to, Hannah and Hannah's introduction to Mayangita, different than what it was with subsequent elephants from there also.
I think it's similar to what they have seen in the wild with transplanting wild elephants into different areas, that when they've done younger groups of elephants that don't have anybody to lead them, it's different. We're talking about age, but same thing as far as looking at somebody with an established layer of understanding and knowledge and being able to guide. And when they put groups of wild elephants without any older elephants and all younger elephants, they've actually had issues with rogue elephants and elephants killing rhinoceros and all these things happening. And then as soon as they introduced 2 older males to this huge herd that they had introduced there, everything shifted. And their take on it was just that you are bringing this older energy, this older knowledge, this level of experience that just wasn't there with the group beforehand, and how much that shifts everything.
A lot going on.
Yeah.
There's a lot of layers to it. There's a lot of elements. And I think, as we're working with new caregivers and even our caregivers that have been here a while who haven't been introductions, that's part of our job here, which is actually exhausting sometimes. It's the layers. It's teaching the layers and getting to think about the layers and not just that one little element we're looking at now. What is behind that element? What is behind that behavior? What is behind,
sort of
that
the
process.
tip of the iceberg, huh?
Absolutely. And I think in general, all looking at the tip of the iceberg as we're trying to help these elephants, because we can't understand what that trauma is that's hiding below the surface.
So before we started our call and pressed record, I was talking about lovely autumn here in Germany, but we can't hide the fact that the year is fast approaching its end. We're in the last quarter of the year. And I remember seeing Halloween decorations in July and thinking, what the bleep? It's only July. And now I'm thinking, what the bleep? It's nearly October and Halloween will be here soon. So this podcast airs on the 14th of October, so only 2.5 weeks after that to Halloween. So Kat, are you planning a Halloween fundraiser this year?
Well, Friends of GSE is holding the fundraiser. GSE isn't the ones who are doing the fundraiser. Friends of GSE, they usually do a Halloween fundraiser. And this year, they actually are keeping it very similar to last year. Last year was for ladies' foot care. And this year, they're actually going to do for Kenya's foot care. Unfortunately, as we've talked about, Kenya's feet are pretty terrible. It's not even, Lady at least just had the fronts. Kenya's fronts and backs are both bad. We've started with trying to get her more comfortable. I would say more comfortable with foot presents, but she's great with foot presents. The issue comes in because she's really sensitive and now her feet hurt and she doesn't want to be as good with foot presents. But we're working on foot soaks and all of these other things to try to help her. Once the rainy season comes, it'll allow us to be able to do more trimming and more work. But the care for her feet is going to be expensive. It will be on the level of what ladies' foot care costs, which ladies' care in general was, I think, 6 times as much as every other elephant we had. And it was just because of her feet. We use a lot of very specialized sprays and topicals. We have a compound pharmacy that we work with that works with nanoparticles to get better absorption deeper into the feet, because a big issue is actual penetration to where the issue is, because it's generally really deep in the foot. And we're assuming she probably has osteomyelitis, although we haven't done x-rays to definitively diagnose it at this point. So again, she's on non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, she's on low-level pain meds, she's going to be getting foot soaks, she's going to be getting multiple topicals on her feet on a daily basis. And it gets expensive.
I think we're going to need to do a fundraising for either coffee or yerba mate también, also because, we need her to wake up before 3 o'clock or 4 o'clock so we can work with her feet. We definitely have a scenario where, in the morning, say, hey, Ken, you want to come over? She's like, sure. Yeah, let's go to sleep. It's like, no, I need to do your feet. No, let's take a nap. So we're going to need to have something as part of her diet to stimulate her a little bit more in the morning to get her out of bed. No.
I was checking some of the social media holidays and I had to think of one. 1st of October is World Coffee Day, so that's one for you as well, Scott, and also you, Kat. So maybe you can put some coffee beans in with Kenya. So I was actually checking up some figures, because people might think, Halloween, talking about how much ladies' foot care costs, and obviously Kenya, if you say all 4 feet are affected. How much do you think Americans spent last year for Halloween, for candy, for sweets, for merchandise, for costumes? Give me a figure. What do you think?
Oh my God, millions. I love Halloween, so I am not going to judge. It is my favorite holiday.
Scott?
Oh, I have no idea, but it's going to be way up there.
Yeah, 11.6 billion US dollars. So we are very humble here at our podcast. I just want 1%, which is 160. I think Canada was 2.1 billion and Europe, including the UK, 2.8 billion. I mean, billion, but 11.6 billion in the US. So 3 candies for humans and 1 candy or the equivalent of for Kenya. So you were saying ladies' 2 feet were affected, but you're saying Kenya's 4 feet are affected. So do we have to worry?
You always have to worry. Unfortunately, when you don't see something significant on the outside, it does not mean there is not a tragedy going on the inside, unfortunately.
I mean, and the feet are in many cases the least of the worries. What we know is, and it is the nature of captivity and the chronic inherent degradation of health. They are not well, and you can't see it from the outside. We talked about it with Sandro. They have this campaign to release Sandro, and her veterinarians are saying, no, he looks good. Yes. if you look at some elements of him, his feet don't look good, his joints don't look good, the way he walks doesn't look good. But is he ultra frail? No, that only happens a week before he dies.
Sure.
But what's happening on the inside, you can't see. You have no idea what's going on. And we've seen it with multiple necropsies where the pathologists are shocked to see the degradation that has happened inside these bodies. And they will say, this elephant was still eating? You'll say, yes, she was eating up until the hour before she passed away. And the pathologist will say, that's not possible. This intestinal system was completely destroyed. How could this elephant have lived? How could they have still been eating? And that's what happens. It's hidden beneath. Psychologically, emotionally, physically, there's a lot that's going on there. So is there reason to be worried with every single captive elephant? Yes, there's reason to be worried.
So our detour down Happy Boulevard. Here we go.
Halloween to dying elephants. But that's the reality.
No, I know. There's definitely concern with her feet. We'll know more when we can start trimming and see what's underneath those pads, what starts happening to the nails, so on and so forth. But yeah, it's impossible to know at this point. And she's a big girl, which never helps. The elephants we've known that have done the best with really bad feet have all been little girls, including Lady. She was a petite little thing. Deli, again, super tiny cutie. So she doesn't really have that going for her either. But we will do our best to take care of her and make her as comfortable as possible and do all we can for her feet. And I have no doubt that her new spatial companion has brought a different level of joy to her life. So that, of course, always helps as well.
Absolutely.
Kat, Scott, you've frozen. I can't hear you anymore. So obviously rainy season is on the horizon. You have no internet, so I will end the podcast without you. Thanks so much for taking time out of your busy schedule and sharing the wonderful news about Pupy and Kenya, now sharing the same yards together with no fences between them. Oh, and before I forget, the podcast team is taking a short break. We'll be back at the beginning of December with new episodes, but there is no need to miss us because we have plenty of past podcasts you can re-listen to in the meantime. I will put all the information about the Halloween fundraiser from Friends of Global Sanctuary for Elephants into the show notes. And if you are able to support the sanctuary by donating, thank you so much. And until we meet up for our next recording, you too, take care. And all our listeners, have a wonderful rest of your day. Thank you. Bye. As we wrap up this week's episode, a reminder that you can stay up to date with current events at the Sanctuary by following GSE on their various social media channels. You'll find all the details in the show notes or directly on their website, globalelephants.org. Thank you so much for your support, and until we meet up for our next episode, take care.